So what we are going to do right now is, using the remix, we are going to write the smart contract. So the smart contract in the current case is your calculator.sol file. So the calculator CAL, see you just putting a short form here. So your calculator.sol file is we're going to return in the remix. Now you started the Ganache also. Okay. So Ganache is basically a simulation version of your Ethereum network. So this is not an exact complete Ethereum network. So if you want to create a blockchain network, you need to create a multiple number of peers, right? And each peer should be having multiple accounts, right? To handle such network is a little bit challenging in our local system. So you need to create a network, and at the same time, when you do a transaction in such private network, in a blockchain network, the data we cannot remove it, right? You cannot edit it, you cannot delete it. It will be there forever. So these are all the challenges when you want to do a testing in a blockchain network, right? So in a production environment, before you go into the production environment, in most of your companies also, they use a simulation tools like this. Okay, Ganache is one part of the tool in Ethereum network, and in Hyperledger they use Dockers. So using the Dockers, they create a multiple number of peers, and using that they are going to communicate. So in our current context, we are going to use the Ganache, which is nothing but your simulation of your Ethereum blockchain network. So we call it as a simulation. So simulation of your Ethereum network. So this is just considered Ethereum network. Okay, so now in this simulation network, Ganache will contain, let's assume this is a peer 1. There is one address like 0x1234, some address is there. You consider this is one of the peer address. Consider this is a P2, which is having another address like 0x567, and you consider there is another peer. So by default, when you start the Ganache, it will list down P1, P2, P3 till P10 addresses. So it means there are some P10 peers are there in the network, and you develop the contract in the remix. So what we have to do is we need to create a connection between your remix and Ganache, because since it is a blockchain network, you compile your smart contract. Here we already compiled a contract and we created your bytecode of your contract, and we have the ABA definition also, right? So when you deploy your contract, you need to have both the information, but most of the time we are going to deal with your bytecode. So you deploy your bytecode into your Ganache network. So when you deploy your contract here, the smart contract will be there right now in the Ganache network. Now once the contract is there, now then you can interact with the functions. So in the contract, what are the functions we have? We have the contract like in a existing situation, we have the calculator contract, which we have function like add function, you have a subtract function, you have a multiply function, and you have a division function, right? So in a contract, we have how many functions? We have 4 functions, which we have deployed in a blockchain network called Ganache network. Now you need to interact with these functions within the contract. So to interact with this functions within the contract, first of all, you need to have a connection to this Ganache network from your user interface. Let's consider this is a user interface, right? So from this user interface, you need to connect to this contract. First of all, we need to connect to this network before connecting into the contract. First of all, we need to connect to this network, and after that, you need to get the details of the contract. So once the details of the contract means, there should be some address. So when you're deploying an application in a network, for example, you are developing a new Android application and you post into the Play Store. So the Play Store, people will download. How they download from the Play Store is they'll have a name for your application. They download by using your application. The same way you deploy your contract in a network. So how people will connect to your network? They should be having some address to connect to your network. So this address information, we need to give it to the user interface. So you will be having the contract. I'm saying it as a CA. is nothing but your contract address. So first thing is you need to deploy the contract. Once the contract is deployed, you will be having an address to the contract. This address we need to again give it to the user interface. User interface will have the contact address. So from this address, you can read out what are the functions you have: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So when you click on the add function, so add is nothing but in simple words, addition of two numbers. When you do that addition of two numbers in a blockchain network, so it means you want to execute this function within the contract. So you'll pass some parameters to this function, add to this function, and this function is executed here. So once the function is executed, it will create a block within the Ganache network. So this block contains your encrypted data of your transaction, like it contains your transaction details. What is the data you are going to encrypt? In the addition part, you are going to pass some numbers like 2 and 3. So these 2 and 3 data will be there, and which is executing this function. This function will create this block. And if you execute any other function like subtract, from here this function subtract will go to this address, and from this address it will invoke this function, and again it is going to create another block. So these blocks will be chained together. So you consider this is a block 1, or maybe this is the block 2. So you consider this is the addition and this is the subtraction. So your arrow should be like this, not like this. So your arrow should be like this. You consider this is a add function block, which is block 1, and you consider this is a block 2, which contains your subtraction. So I'm just quickly repeating what we are going to do right now. So the calculator contract, which we are going to write using the remix. So we are compiling the contract code from the remix, and we are deploying the contract into the Ganache network, which is a simulation of your blockchain network. And once you deploy the contract code into the Ganache network, an address will be generated. The address will be passed back again to the user interface, which we are treating it as a remix right now. Once you have the contract address is there, from this contract address it is going to list down all the functions into your remix, and we can interact with the functions. So when you can invoke the functions in a contract, those functions invocation will lead to your transactions, and the transactions will be tracked under your blocks in your blockchain network. In future, this is a tamper proof. Okay, so nobody cannot tamper these blocks. Okay, so which person has executed this transaction? Okay, and at what time he has executed the transaction. So in this case, instead of calculator, assume this is a real estate contract. So in a real estate contract, a government official is updating a record of a specific person, saying that okay, this is a property is given to the specific person, and he is recording under the block, and he is updating. So this is a tamper. Nobody cannot tamper this data. This is visible to all the people. So right now you can consider some of the data, you can say that public, some of the data you can make it as private. Understood, right? The same way, you'll have 3-4 banks also, they can interact with the contract, and they can execute some of the functions within the contract, and they can share this data in a public network or within a group of banks also. So far we are understanding about only a simple contract in your local system. Let's assume a very bigger use case where you will have multiple banks are involved in the network, and they have a contract which will be shared among the group of banks, and the data should be visible to that group of banks. Okay, so such applications we can simulate. Okay, so before we go to talk about more use cases, let's execute this application. Okay, so this contract we are able to compile it, and we are able to is not yet deployed, but only so far we just compile it. Now we need to, first of all, we need to establish a connection between this Ganache and to the remix. So before I go into that step, let me explain about how the Ganache looks like. Okay, so I told previously Ganache is having some 10 accounts, right? So you consider this is peer 1, peer 2, peer 3, like that. You have 10 peers. Assume these are all the 10 peers in the network. And so far there are no blocks, 0 blocks, and there are no transactions in the network. Okay, and you can see the current blocks, which is representing as 0 here, and you can get some network ID. So there is an identification number for your Ganache network. Yeah, and you have some RPC address. RPC is nothing but remote process communication. Okay, so let's assume this is a network which is running in a cloud network. Okay, so in that case you need to connect to this network, some with IP address and port number. I'll come back to in detail about what is this RPC. So you'll be having an IP address and a port number for your Ganache network, because this is a public, let's assume this is a network which is running in your system. If a network is running in a network, bigger network, there you will be having an IP address and port number, right? In that case you need to connect to that network. So to connect to this network, we need to have your IP address and port number. Just copy that RPC server, copy this 127.0.0.18545, make a copy of this, and now go into the run option in your remix. Go to the run. So don't do any execution, just see my screen for a few minutes. Go to the run option and select environment as Web3 provider. Okay, I'll tell you what is this Web3 provider. Select the Web3 provider. So you'll be having a pop-up asking that, are you sure you want to connect to the Ethereum node? So the Ethereum node is your Ganache network. So we need to connect to the Ethereum node. Ethereum node, always remember, we have the get. So Ethereum node is nothing but your get. So now click on OK, and whatever the copied address of your Ganache, just copy it here. So I told you to copy that Ganache address right here. Copy this address. Copy this address. And now when you click on the Web3 provider, you'll have a pop-up and copy the address here. And now click on OK. So when you click on OK, you can see this custom address. You can see there is a custom number like network ID 5777, right? So make sure you have the 5777 is there, and the same 5777 you can see here. It means having the same number here, it means you have a connection established between your remix and to the Ganache. Clear? So make a connection established between these two. Now you can start communicating between these two people, these two networks. So you'll have a connection established between your remix and Ganache. Now we can deploy your contract. So far the blocks are 0. See it here, the blocks are 0. Now I see that, go to the remix, click on deploy. When you click on the deploy, and now go back to your Ganache network and click on blocks, and you can check there is one block is created. Okay, you can see your contract is created here. So the contract address is 0x58B3, right? So that is an address, and you can see the same address here also. You can see there is an address created, calculator at 0x58D 0x58D. It means your contract is deployed in the Ganache network. That address, it is, you are trying to read it from your remix browser. So how we are going to read that information? Using your Web3 interface, you are deploying the contract into this Ganache network, and you are able to read your network. 1 minute, let me explain that. Okay, so if you see here, previously we deployed the contract from your user interface to Ganache. So we need to deploy some, we need to use some interface, right? So what is the interface we are using is using your Web3 interface. Using this Web3, you are deploying, you are taking the contract of soul file and deploying it here, and this address you are going to receive it to here. So now once the address is there, the next step is we need to execute all these functions. Okay,